Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie, and today I have a couple of exciting new releases to share from Cracked Polish. First, we're going to be looking at their new Grandma Core collection, which is a 6-piece lineup of cream polishes. I also have the new Jelly of the Month to share, and we have an exciting new duo that was created in collaboration with Audrey Swatches from Instagram. She creates some absolutely beautiful nail art, so I will have her Instagram linked down below if you aren't following her already, but I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. The first shade we have is Crinkled Linens, which is described as an off-white cream. As you can see, the formula on this one was so incredible. It was super pigmented, super full coverage. I was expecting it to be a little bit more streaky or thinner, and not that I would call it a one-coater by any means, but it just provided such a perfect base layer that this is a solid two-coater. I do think the description is very accurate as well, but for all intents and purposes, I would just call this a white polish, though you'll see how it compares to a true white later. Next we have Don't Throw Stones, which is a gray cream with a hint of lilac. This one had another super pigmented, flawless, creamy kind of formula. It was nearly a one-coater, which, spoiler alert, it's gonna be the same for almost all of the polishes in this collection. So I think they're gonna be great, especially for nail art. But yeah, I did 2 coats on this one and it was perfectly opaque. I personally would have just called this like a very neutral gray. I didn't see that much of a lilac undertone in this, but it definitely is cool toned. Then we have Oversized Bow, which is described as a taffy pink cream. So not to sound like a broken record, but this one had another super pigmented, very full coverage formula that was nearly opaque on the first coat, though I did do a little bit of a thinner coat, so there were some more like streaks or a little bald spot near the left side of my nail. So I did have to go over that, but it was perfectly opaque in 2 coats again. As far as the description goes, I don't know how accurate it is because I just wasn't familiar with taffy pink, but I would have called this like a bubblegum or maybe an orchid pink because it does lean a little bit purple. Next up we have Buttoned Brown, which is a rich, warm brown cream. Even though this is brown, it definitely has a very, very strong red kind of undertone to it. I don't know if mahogany is the right color to describe it, but it's just a very like red brown. And no surprise, this one had another super flawless, pigmented, creamy formula. I personally think it looks really great on the first coat where it kind of pulls a little bit more red, but you could do the second coat to deepen the color more. Then we have Bluebell Bonnet, which is described as a medium blue cream, and I'm not sure how the application will be for anybody else, but I got this opaque in just 1 coat. It just had such a creamy, lush formula that self-leveled the best. I was so impressed with it, and I love the color too. And rounding out the collection, we have Sunlit Moss, which is a moss green cream. Now, unfortunately, this one didn't have the same super lush, almost one-coat type of formula like most of the other polishes in the collection. I would say that this one leans ever so slightly on the crelly side, which maybe is a little bit more obvious towards the left side of my nail or near my cuticle, especially on the first coat where it's just a little bit thinner there. But it still is very heavily pigmented, so still a cream, but just not as creamy as the others. And as far as the color description goes, I definitely think it's very accurate, where it's just that perfect sunlit mossy green. The jelly of the month for April is called You Want a Peach of Me, which is a peach jelly. So I definitely would say this has one of the more truer jelly kind of finishes. As I've mentioned before in some previous jelly reviews, they are sometimes a little bit more pigmented and almost crellies, but as you'll see when I build this up in 1, 2, and 3 coats, this one just maintains that super glassy translucency that makes it a very true jelly in my book. It has a nice subtle wash of color that's honestly barely there on the first coat, but you do see a little bit more of it on 2 coats, and in my opinion it looks the best on 3. It has such a nice warm peachy color that isn't too saturated, so at least on me it kind of looked like a neutral. And lastly, for the Something to Ponder duo created with Audrey Swatches, the first polish is Pond Stew. This is described as a lake green filled with blue aurora shimmers, iridescent flakes, larger pink flakes, and black microflakes. This one had a super beautiful formula that was incredibly even on the first coat. It had a decent wash of color, and it's obviously, again, packed with all of those shimmers and flakies, so I feel like it could look nice on one coat alone, but I built this up to full opacity in 2. And the other shade from the duo is Petals on the Surface, which is a pink magnetic topper with a slight gold shift in extreme angles. So even though this is described as a topper, and I will show it that way in a little bit, I thought that this had like a subtle wash of color, so I wanted to build it up on its own first because it just really reminded me of those super sheer ethereal kind of shimmers. The pink magnetic shimmer is definitely super strong, very vibrant and glowy, and you can see as I build this up in 2 and especially 3 coats, the sort of base color becomes a little bit more apparent, having this like dark, almost dingy brown kind of color. And there also is this tiny little micro speck in there that I'm not quite sure if it's part of the magnetic pigment, but I don't think so since it didn't seem to move after I velvetized it, which looked super gorgeous, by the way. I loved the pink flash. And of course I am also going to be showing this as a topper over Pond Stew with the cat eye effect, as well as You Want a Peach of Me, which I don't think looks as good because again you just see a lot of those little micro specks versus losing them in something like Pond Stew where it's a little bit more busy. So no surprise when layered over the rest of the Grandma Core creams, I personally like how it looked more over the darker shades in the collection versus the lighter ones. So I apparently deleted my full hand swatches of these creams, which is really frustrating. I'm so sorry, but here is a collage of the thumb swatches of the Grandma Core shades. I was really intrigued by the color story. It's just not something I would have come up with. So now getting into comparisons, we're starting with Crinkled Linens, and of course looking at it next to a pure white, so I'm using Cracked Polish's Joke's on You, but I did also want to compare it to Olive Ave's Calcite, which is their off-white with like a hint of gray. So here you can see built up in 2 coats each that Crinkled Linens definitely is not a pure white, but it does lean closer to Joke's on You than Calcite in my opinion. Next for Don't Throw Stones, I could not find my bottle of Orly's Dreamers Awake, which is pretty much the only other true light neutral gray that I had in my collection. So seeing this side by side, I can see a little bit more of that lilac undertone in Cracked. Next for Oversized Bow, I have a couple of quick bottle comparisons, starting with some cracked pinks like She Doesn't Even Go Here and Bubblegum Yum Yum. Both of those are pink jellies, so they're just going to be even lighter and more translucent, but hopefully you can tell that they are slightly warmer pinks maybe, or you can just see the drop of purple in Oversized Bow. And here it is next to a couple of cracked purples like Lavender Chai and Lavender Jade. Lavender Jade is a cream, but you can tell that that one is more of like a true purple. So Oversized Bow leans more pink, but again, it does have a little drop of purple, so it's like an orchid color. I thought I had something closer from Olive Ave, but the closest 2 shades I had were Vernal and Amaryllis. Vernal, I believe, is more of a neutral pink, while Amaryllis is a little bit more warmer tone, slightly peachy. So Oversized Bow is definitely the coolest of these 3. And then I remembered I did have some closer shades. The first one I pulled out was China Glaze's Here for the Candy, which I would probably describe as a bleached neon orchid pink kind of color. Definitely a little bit more pink than Oversized Bow, but then I also had Deborah Lippmann's Ooh La La, which I feel like is a dead-on dupe. In certain angles, I feel like you can see a little bit of a difference in the color or maybe the application, but in real life, it was just so hard to tell them apart, so I definitely would call them dupes, which is great news considering Deborah Lippmann is a luxury brand with a $20 price point. Moving on to Button Brown, I knew I wanted to see this next to Chinotto from the Italy collection because even though that one is more of a jelly kind of formula, so it is a little bit more translucent, it still is very close in regards to that reddish brown kind of color. So I did 2 coats here, and you can definitely tell that Chinotto is a little bit lighter, more squishy, but when you do a 3rd coat, it does deepen the color a little bit more to get closer to Button Brown, so not an exact dupe, but definitely close. And here are some bottle comparisons for Red and my Blood Aches. Red is a dark crimson blood red shade, so not anywhere near as brown as Button Brown, and my Blood Aches is more of like a rusty red orange. Next for Bluebell Bonnet, I knew I had to show this next to Drizzle, which was the blue cream from last year's spring collection. That one is much darker, almost having this like midnight blue kind of quality to it. It's also a little bit more on the crelly leaning side. You can see like that one swipe near my cuticle, so definitely not dupes. For some other dark blue color references, here are Mooncat's Into the Abyss and Olive Ave's Middle of the Night, which I thought was going to be a lot closer. I mean, it's closer than Into the Abyss, but it's still a little too dark. And then I thought to pull out Olive Ave's Virgo, which is a few shades lighter and kind of this dark jewel-toned periwinkle, I think is how it's described. And these are near dupes. Like, there is a 1% color difference where I think I would say Virgo is a little bit more purple leaning or blurple, but they're basically dupes. Moving on to Sunlit Moss, here it is quickly next to Stem, which was the green cream from last year's collection. That one's more of a true mid-tone grassy green, definitely not as yellow. So when it comes to these more yellow, olivey moss greens, I have Color Department's Moss and Mooncat's The Stranger. I would say that The Stranger is the most true like olive color. It's a lot more yellow leaning, a little bit darker as well. So probably unsurprising, Sunlit Moss is basically the closest to moss. It just looks a few shades lighter. And lastly, for You Want a Peach of Me, I of course have to show this next to Cirque's Sherbet Jelly or Fuyu Jelly and Dimension Nails Orange Pecan Milk, which is closer, at least in terms of value. Like, they're both the lighter peachy kind of jellies, while Cirque is just more vibrant, more saturated in color. But Cirque is a little bit closer in terms of the warmth that the cracked jelly has, so I figured I could try to recreate it if you happen to have the Cirque jellies. My application was a little streaky because my linen has a skinny brush, but color-wise it's kind of close. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for all of these new cracked releases. So as always, I would love to know your thoughts on these because overall, I had such a great time with all of them. Starting with the Grandma Core collection, while I wasn't the biggest fan of like the color palette, the actual polishes themselves are some of Monique's best in my opinion. They were so pigmented and just like rich. I just loved painting my nails with them. It was just so satisfying. I feel like the slightly darker kind of muted color palette does remind me a lot of last year's Gloom and Doom collection, I think it was called, where it's just, you know, like a slightly darker take on spring colors. So I do appreciate that Monique is always giving options for people. Individually, I thought the polishes were amazing, and the same goes for the other shades too, like the new Jelly and the Duo. The Jelly is such a cute and fun shade, especially for this time of year. I think it's going to be so perfect for like the warmer months. I know this is obviously like a peach color, but I feel like because it's so light and soft, it almost has this like neutral look to it, which I really like. And lastly, with the Something to Ponder Duo, I thought it was just so beautiful. Like, it's very much giving Audrey and her style. Like I mentioned in the intro, she creates some absolutely beautiful works of art on her nails, and these polishes just look so perfect for what she usually does, because a lot of her work is very like layered and intricate, and I feel like you get those elements, especially with Pond Stew being that gorgeous like teal kind of base color filled with the shimmer and the flakies. But I love that she gave a pink magnetic kind of topper to add on top of whatever base that you want, just to create a little extra sparkle or dimension. So overall, we have some great new releases coming from Cracked. If you are interested in picking any of them up, they are going to be releasing next Friday, April 25th. As a reminder, I am an affiliate with Cracked Polish, so I will have my link and code in the description box down below. As a reminder, if you use either of those, I receive a small commission, which greatly supports me and my channel. So a big thank you to all of you who do support me through that. But even if you don't plan on picking anything up, of course, let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!